Some common misconceptions about labeling. Very often companies say, oh, I've already had my label approved. When, in fact, FDA does not license, FDA does not approve labels for food, except for meat and poultry and alcoholic beverages where you are required to submit labeling in advance. But when it comes to processed foods or most agricultural products, there is no approval process. There is no office where you mail in your label to FDA and you wait for them to say, yes, we approve, your label looks perfect. How FDA operates, they expect you to read the Code of Federal Regulations and then to prepare and to label your product properly based on the Code of Federal Regulations. Some other common misconceptions: barcodes, lot numbers, expiration dates. Those are not elements regulated by FDA. Barcodes are often customer driven. If I'm a retailer, I would like to have a barcode on my product for inventory and sales purposes at checkout, at the cash register. Lot numbers are beneficial for you in case you ever have to recall product, as are expiration dates commonly expected, but they're not actually required on your label by FDA. Keep in mind, label compliance does not stop just with labeling. FDA also reviews companies' websites, printed material, and other areas. They consider those to be a part of the label. So they will actually look at companies' websites, and if you're making claims about your products that are not acceptable to FDA under the regulations, they will issue a warning letter, and you can see all of these warning letters posted on the FDA website very frequently. They will post those and you can review those. So keep in mind, labeling doesn't just stop with the label itself. Here's a little example, a quick example of what a good label versus a bad label might look like. The top is the before. We've circled elements that are incorrect. The bottom label is a corrected version showing how it should look. Now I'm going to move on to other types of products regulated by FDA. If you produce a low-acid or acidified canned food product, and when I say canned, in fact, it could be canned, bottled, jarred, perhaps in a Tetra Pak, those products, depending on their water activity and pH level, are regulated by FDA. The department there is called the Low-Acid Canned Food Division at FDA. And there are specific registration requirements for the factory producing those products, as well as what they call submission of process filings, where you must explain to FDA how you actually are producing that particular product. Another area to focus on, if you're producing seafood or juices, you are required to operate under a HACCP plan in your factory. If you're producing other processed foods, you are not currently required to operate under HACCP plan for the U.S. market, but that is changing under the new requirements of the Food Safety Modernization Act, which I'll talk about here in a couple moments. I'll also say that good manufacturing practices are required for all food, beverage, dietary supplement production. GMPs are a very important aspect of sanitation systems that you set up within your factory from day one, and very critical for exports to any market, whether it's your home market or whether you're exporting to the U.S. or to other countries around the world. Now, what happens if you've done a shipment and your product is detained? I'm displaying here a document called a Notice of Action. This is a document issued by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and it is typically sent to two parties. It is sent to the customs broker, who has been hired by the U.S. importer, that is your customer, and it is sent to the U.S. importer of record. So only those two parties will receive this Notice of Action, which details the reason FDA has detained your shipment. So if your customer calls you up or sends you an email and says, the shipment's been stopped by FDA, what are we going to do now? How can we proceed? I'm not going to be able to get the product when I need it, etc. Ask them for a copy of the Notice of Action issued by FDA. That notice will explain to you the exact reason the shipment has been detained. It will tell you in what port. It will identify the product. It will also explain the reason. And most importantly, it will give you the contact details for the FDA inspector that detained the product. Their phone number, their email address, and lastly, it will stipulate a deadline for responding to FDA for the Notice of Action. Depending on the product, depending on the problem, you may be able to solve, we may be able to help you solve the detention. So it really depends on the nature of the reason outlined in the Notice of Action as to whether or not you will ultimately be successful in getting the product released, or as to whether we can help you if it's a relabeling issue or perhaps a registration issue. When products are detained, they are indicated and updated and placed in a database called OASIS, which is available on the internet for anyone to see. It is searchable by month, by country, and you will then view the individual companies that have had products detained and when and why. So it is an interesting resource. It's also obviously very valuable for companies in the United States because it is searchable. They can go look and see if a potential supplier they are thinking purchasing product from, if they have had a problem in the past with FDA, and if they are listed in the OASIS database. Now let's talk about some of the voluntary programs. I focus there on what's required under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, but let's talk about some of the voluntary programs. And when I say voluntary, these are customer-driven programs. Your buyer at Walmart, or your buyer at Trader Joe's, or your importer may say to you, I need your products to be kosher certified, or I need you to be fair trade certified, or halal. These are customer-driven requirements. They help retailers sell your product. They are not regulated, however, by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. So you need to keep those two things separate if you're pursuing ISO 22000 or BRC or IFS or one of the other food safety schemes. SQF is another one. Excellent. Those are wonderful ways to help make sure your factory, your production is meeting those requirements, the requirements under those schemes. But again, these are not currently, any of these, regulated or required by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.